You ever think about how something as tiny as a mosquito can completely change your night? It's relentless, it's focused, and let's be real, it doesn't care if you're Elon Musk or an intern on their first day. One small thing creating real impact. But what if that same principle applies to us, to leadership, relationships, and how we show up in business? Maybe the difference between chaos and connection isn't about scale, it's about intention. Welcome back, listeners, to this episode of the BizBlend Podcast with your host, Sana. Now, today we are going to explore what a mosquito can teach us about making a difference through the lens of perspective, honesty, and all the leadership qualities, and how these small, almost invisible qualities can transform both the leadership and relationships as well. And listeners, to help me with this deep dive, we have Tom Hagerty here. Tom, welcome to the show. It's really an honor to have you here.
Thank you, Sana. It's an honor to be here, and I'm looking forward to our discussion about mosquitoes and many other things.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, listeners, before we proceed on to our conversation, I'll just introduce a bit, share a bit about Tom with all of you. So, he's a retired corporate executive, a business fixer, and a career spanning over more than 4 decades. He has made presentations, he has been to private events, articles, op-ed pieces, and he has also been interviewed by a variety of print publications and as well media outlets. But on the offside, leaving everything aside, he is a father, dad, papa, an author of The Business of Relationships. So, with that, Tom, once again, welcome, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Let's see how it
And thank
goes.
you, Sana, and I'm looking forward to it as well.
Super, super. Okay, Tom. Let's begin with this quote. So the quote goes as follows: If you think you are too small to have an impact, try sleeping with a mosquito. What does that quote say about the way individuals underestimate their power in leadership and relationships?
Well, it's one of my favorite quotes that's in the book, The Business of Relationships, and it comes from a now deceased female entrepreneur named Anita Roddick. And what is so compelling about her life is this is someone who was born in a bomb shelter in World War II England. She lost both her father and her stepfather by the time she was 13. She was married, she had some children, and her husband, post war, left for America to carve out a career as a salesperson, leaving her behind with the three children. They were still married and stayed married for all of their lives, but she ended up, Sana, founding a company that was a cosmetics company. And their distinguishing point was that they would not provide any products that had been tested on animals. She began to sell some of these products out of the trunk of her car, trying to subsist while her husband was in the States and sending money home. And she ended up building this enterprise into what became the Body Shop, which was a worldwide chain of cosmetics uh, businesses, if you will, cosmetics locations. And upon her death, Gordon Brown, who was the Prime Minister of England at the time, called her England's greatest entrepreneur in history. He didn't say greatest female entrepreneur or greatest cosmetics entrepreneur. He said greatest entrepreneur, period. She also founded several organizations that cared for orphans who were the victims of war and, lost parents, lost family, etc. And, she is just a great example of someone who exhibited a high degree of resilience, self-confidence, perspective, honesty, trust. She was just a glorious example of what an entrepreneur can be. And where I enjoyed her quote is it was actually from a speech that she gave to her employees at the body shop, at one of these annual address kind of things. And she was trying to emphasize to these people, and many of them were female because, this was Avon Cosmetics predecessor and a lot of other things. And it gave women a leg up in business. It gave them a way to get into the business world. And when she gave this quote, anytime you think you're too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito. She was trying to say to people that every little thing you do, every little action you take, every little acknowledgement you give a coworker can make a huge difference. And I think that's really the message that too few of us internalize today and resonate with. I think it's clear that our relationships are suffering. Isolation is on the increase. Loneliness is on the increase. Male suicide across the world is dramatically increasing. I heard the other day it's 5 times greater than it was 20 years ago. And this acceleration of isolation and privatization of our relationships is extremely damaging. And I think now more than ever, maybe this quote resonates or should resonate with people that those small things you do, those small acknowledgments, those small words of praise, those small offers of assistance can make a huge difference in somebody's life. And I think the mosquito analogy is both humorous and compelling.
Wow. I'll be very, very honest, Tom. I am a consumer of Body Shop. I love their products. However, it's a shame that I did not know the origin story.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's interesting about the Body Shop because Anita Roddick ended up selling that to the L'Oreal company, which owns it today, and that is how she made her fortune. But the grit and determination to start an enterprise like that, literally out of the trunk of your car with her small daughters in tow, speaks to the qualities of perseverance, the qualities of just determination, of just a dogged dedication to a vision. The Body Shop is a wonderful example of entrepreneurial action in action, so to speak.
yeah, absolutely. And Tom, I don't know whether it's a coincidence or not, but just another day, I was recently just recorded an episode with the guest, where we were talking about how leadership isn't about results, how people-driven cultures, people-first culture, um, they drive performance. So my next question is kind of related to that. And I would love to know your perspective. Do you think that we have become too dependent on scale, uh, whether it's followers or engagement, teams, metrics, rather than the quality of influence we bring?
I do. I think without question, we're seeing that in our relationships that are failing. I mean, when you talk about emphasizing skill over personality or skill over relationship, I think the relationship is always, you know, going to be primal to long-term success. Um, the skill will get you so far. You can be the best computer programmer, you can be the best salesperson, you could be the best financial manager, project manager, but that skill is only going to get you so far because we need each other. I mean, we were built for this. Human beings were built for working in community. And when we isolate and when we privatize, our influence, if you will, which I've heard that as a new term now, privatizing your influence or privatizing your relationships. It's become so easy to be independent. And I think long term, that is going to be uh, difficult for a business to survive and absolutely difficult for us as human beings in community to survive.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that I think this may sound discomforting, but I think this discomfort is where real leadership actually begins, not where it ends. So there's definitely a way out. And moving on further, you have also said that failed relationships cost businesses trillions. I mean, we often see where um, a company would just either dissolve or um, go into complete limbo over partnerships, um, uh, feuds or arguments or kind of breaking trust. So, why do you think organizations ignore something so human when building corporate cultures?
I really think today that businesses don't know how to respond to the changes that are here. We were dramatically unprepared for COVID. We were dramatically unprepared for remote working. We were dramatically unprepared for the independence and the transactional nature of employment that those circumstances brought. And I think it's just accelerated something that probably began with the worldwide financial crisis in 2008, 2009. Uh, People have lost confidence in institutions, what is called the third room, which was, we had family, we had church, and then we had third rooms, which were civic organizations where people assembled and collaborated, and we have business, and a lot of that structure or that fabric has been torn since COVID, and I think it's accelerating now even greater. And when I talked about the almost $8 trillion worldwide problem, this is businesses in a Gallup survey in 2022. I'm sure that the figure is greater than that now, but it was $8 trillion in 2022 that businesses said, because of failed relationships, because of broken structures, if you will, between our employees and among our employees, we are seeing decreased productivity. We are seeing accelerated resignations, departures. We are seeing terms like quiet quitting and workplace ghosting, bare minimum Mondays, and all of these phrases that have come about have created in business a drain on profit. I mean, this is an $8 trillion problem in 2022, and I think it's only going to get greater. And until we resolve in our organizations to emphasize people first, as your previous broadcast said, until we emphasize that, I think we are going to miss out on opportunities, in a very significant way.
That absolutely makes sense. That absolutely makes sense. And um, it's wild that we spend billions on productivity tools, on automations, on and now AI. Like everything is now becoming AI. But I think we forget the most basic, the oldest one, connection. And I think that's where no app or no sophisticated models can replace belonging.
I would agree 100%. I was listening to a lengthy podcast the other day that the topic was friendship. And, a lot of research went into it. It's a 4 hour commitment of time. I didn't do it all in one bite. And it's headed up by the author Mark Manson from the Subtle Art book.
Okay.
And his comment was that friendship is both essential and relatively simple. You need things like proximity, you need things like reciprocity, You need things like, a direct and repeatable contact. This is not hard, but many people look at friendship and they say, well, that's inefficient because social media allows me to be an influencer over thousands of people where biologically human beings are not wired to have more than 150 meaningful relationships. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have them. It simply means that we're not wired to have more than that. But I think technology in many ways has has jumped in and said, let us show you how to become more efficient. And the influence that many of us crave is very superficial and will never replace rather the depth and quality of friendships that are mutually invested in. So I think we're in a very difficult time right now. I mean, again, in America, uh, one of the statistics that is disturbing to me is that our children in America are 3 times more likely to grow up in a single parent household than the worldwide average. And when you think of that, that is unbelievable in a country that is the most rich, the most powerful, the most democratic society in history. And yet we're saying that it's kind of okay if our children suffer. It's kind of okay if we just make divorce and separation and family breakup easier legally. And what that tells our children is that, you don't matter, and you don't matter 3 times more than the worldwide average. I think we're just in a terrible spot right now, and we have to pay attention to the leaders that can guide us, if you will, back to some kind of sense of propriety and normalcy.
Mm, mm. I think this is debatable, Tom. This is debatable because when it comes to human, that's the beauty here that there are so many aspects here. In India also, if I can say, and I'm not sure whether the listeners would agree with me or not. This is what it's my personal opinion. Um, if you look at the divorce rates in India, I think it's less than even 1%.
Mm.
Which would look good on paper. However, if you go look deeply into it, there is another aspect or another side to this particular kind of culture here that we are family driven, we are family oriented. Um, we know that once you come into the marital world here, you have certain duties to perform, and if you decide to break that relationship, um, it's going to affect the generations, your children, broken household. But on the same side, we also kind of have been seeing that there are many relationships where both the partners, they're kind of physically there, but they are not connected with each other emotionally. And although everything looks fine on the outer side, but deeper down, the dynamics are very much different from how it should ideally look like. And that also kind of affects children as well, because children, they're very, very much receptive to their surroundings, to what they are seeing, what they're hearing, what they're experiencing. So I think there are different aspects here to talk about, when it comes to society or relationships here. Hmm.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I mean, this is a very, very complex problem without a simple solution. Uh, you know, I think that to some degree, cultures that are more homogenous, if you will, do not have the divorce rates that we in the West experience, whether that's England, Australia, the United States, Canada, etc. We are very diverse cultures. There is a lot of intermarriage, mixing of ethnicities, etc., that may not be true in some more homogenous cultures. So I think there's a lot of nuance to this problem. I think my point in saying that American children are 3 times more likely to grow up in a single parent household is that it is so different and so much bigger than the worldwide average that you'd say, you know what, if we were 30% more likely or we were 15% more likely, but when you say 3 times more likely, I think that speaks to me as an American of saying, somehow we got this wrong. Somehow we made it too easy. Somehow we're not listening to the guidance that we should be listening to, whether that is from a faith tradition, whether it's from business, whether it's from friendships, whether it is from relatives, whether it's from history. We're not listening to that. And I think what is happening is that we're kind of in America anyway, saying that's okay because we're rich, we're powerful, we're democratic, and everything will just fix itself. And nothing is going to fix itself unless we take an active role to be the fixer.
Hmm. Mm. Well, yeah, it is definitely complex. But then the statistics, the numbers don't lie. And I think it is something that uh, sometimes really gets ignored, or maybe people wouldn't want to talk about it openly.
Well, I think you're exactly correct. And, I would say this, that in my memory, I don't want to sound like an old curmudgeon, but I am a retired guy that worked his way through corporate America and private consulting and so forth over a 40-year span, maybe more than that, I think, if I did the math. But I think up until about 10 years ago, there was no such thing as a term like quiet quitting, or there was no such thing as a term like workplace ghosting.
Yeah,
There
it
was, there
wasn't.
was no such thing as bare minimum Mondays. These have now been part of a business lexicon that executives are trying to grapple with, and it's brand new. And it's brand new because we just have become so individualistic, so self-centered, so concerned with only what we need and want, what I need and want. We've become this highly individualistic uh, culture, at least in America, and that is going to be, I think, a long term um, damage. It's going to do long term damage to our businesses. I mean, if you have an employee who quits and doesn't tell anyone, he just quits showing up. She just quits coming into work. Uh, deadlines are missed. Nobody knows where he or she is, et cetera. And if that individual is basically saying, I can do this because I got another job, I'll never come back to your company, and I don't even owe you the courtesy of letting you know that I am not going to be your employee anymore. I'm not going to give you any notice. Um, there is statistics out there from Gallup and Nielsen and others that indicate that that kind of quitting is on the rise, that employees who are in failing relationships or don't feel they have good relationships at work are 67% more likely to quit abruptly. It's just not a recipe for success.
And why do you like? Is there any exact reason in there, or it's just how we are seeing change, whether it comes to generations or our thought processes or any influence, external influence? What do you think would be the reason?
I think there's a number of factors in this, Sana, and I
Mm.
don't think business is blameless. This is not something where I am coming down on the side of business and saying that the employee is always at fault. I mean, there are situations right now where there is overwork, where there is, a lack of advancement possibilities. There is a digital always on culture that is being fostered that remote work means always work. There isn't that separation that we had. So I think business is to blame in a lot of ways for this. And the business executives who are going to thrive and succeed long term are going to be the ones who recognize that and do things to address the culture that makes an employee want to stay, that makes an employee want to contribute, that makes an employee want to advance. So in no way, shape, or form is business blameless in this issue either.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a balanced approach. And let me also take the conversation to the other side here as well. You suggest that, and I really find this very, very interesting. You suggest we should listen to CEOs for lessons in relationships. But what do you say to people who think CEOs caused many of the world's relational and ethical crises?
I think that's an easy out for a lot of people. I don't believe that the CEO necessarily, if he or she is a good leader, I don't believe that we can lay a lot of the world's problems on the CEO. I mean, I'll give you an example. One of the quotes that I really gravitated to was from Jack Welch from General Electric Company, and Jack Welch had a reputation, as you well know. He was a tough guy. He was a guy that did, hundreds of acquisitions. He shuttered plants. He closed businesses. He, said that the top or the bottom 10% of employees were going to be at risk every year at General Electric. It was very much a merit-based culture when he was there. A lot of people can fault that. But I remember I was at General Electric at the time when he was CEO, never met him, but met his top lieutenants. And, and one of the things that Jack Welch said in a speech, he was giving this speech to his business leaders across all the businesses. So it was GE Medical, GE Aircraft, GE Finance, et cetera, et cetera. And the message he was delivering to them was simply this. He said, if you are not number one or number two in your marketplace, I will fix you, close you, or sell you. I mean, you can't get a lot more direct than that, right? Those executives knew exactly what the metric was. You had to be number one or number two in your marketplace, or you were going to get fixed, closed, or sold. And his follow-on to that, he said, change before you have to. And that quote was a decidedly business quote. It had nothing to do with a relationship. It was change before you have to, your business. And I took that quote and I said, what if you applied that to a relationship? Change before you have to, the passive aggressive nature that you exhibit with your family that's destructive. Change before you have to, your financial irresponsibility. Change before you have to, your budding addiction. Change before you have to, your bad temper. You could go on and on and on. I think a quote like that can be highly instructive, just like the mosquito that we talked about at the early part of the show. Uh, and there are quotes from Steve Jobs and Bill Gates about, success being a lousy teacher. There are quotes from Carly Fiorina that said, if you're going to lead change, you better get ready to take some arrows in the back. Sheryl Sandberg said, each one of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. What if we applied those business quotes to a personal relationship, looked in the mirror, took personal responsibility, and said, I'm going to move to make things better, to make things different? I think CEOs can be highly instructive, and the the fact that that quote appeared in a shareholder letter, or it appeared in a board meeting minutes, or it appeared on a CNN interview, that's immaterial. The quote itself can be instructive in a much broader sense than just the business context.
Mm, I absolutely agree with that. Absolutely agree with that. But also, just to make it more nuanced, do you also think that is proactive change even realistic in our current burnout culture?
I think it has to be. I think we have to get back to the mindset that we had, years ago, decades ago, where people were more fearless about looking in the mirror. They were more fearless about taking responsibility, about being accountable. Uh, and I think we've lost some of that. And I think the change before you have to, what I frequently say to people, whether it's in private consulting or in some kind of a corporate presentation, is that we have lost the desire and the ability to look in the mirror and own it. Many times when a relationship is failing, when an opportunity is missed, when something is going awry, many times we just have to have the courage to look in the mirror and say, what do I own? What do I need to change? What do I need to do? And I think this culture currently is progressing to a point where personal responsibility is extremely low and personal accountability is extremely low. So I think we need to get back to capturing that and taking ownership. And I say this to people all the time. I can't imagine the sacrifices that our parents and grandparents made in two world wars and in other major conflicts around the world. They sacrificed their interests, they sacrificed their finances, they sacrificed their future opportunities in many cases, all for a greater good of creating a free world, which would not have existed had they not made those sacrifices. I question whether these generations that are coming up now would have the will and the capability of making those kind of similar sacrifices.
It's definitely a hard question. It's a difficult question, and I couldn't agree more with you on this, Tom, because I may not agree on certain things or opinions or views that my parents would have, probably because times have changed. Something, as you mentioned about quite quitting or um, you know, all about the other terms, ghosting, workplace ghosting, and all. It wasn't even relevant during our, when I started my career. Um, we were still in that belief that, because um, this is an opportunity where I have to learn everything. I own that responsibility that I have to learn because this is exactly what's going to be instrumental in deciding my career trajectory and also my personal development, my growth. I think I may not agree with those viewpoints or opinions, certain viewpoints and opinions with my parents, but I wholly, absolutely acknowledge the sacrifices they have made, whether it comes um, to put food on the table for four people, um, make sure that um, education is sustained, healthcare with just one person taking care of four lives, often sacrificing personal wishes or whims, or, I mean, that is something I'm not sure whether I would be able to do that or not. So that is something I definitely always would learn from my parents, from my father.
Absolutely. I think, I am the oldest of 10 siblings, 10 children. My father was a commissioned salesperson in a life insurance business.
Oh,
Mother didn't work
interesting.
outside the home until very late in his career. She went back to teaching when my youngest sibling was already in high school. And I can't begin to imagine, and all 10 of us ended up with college degrees. All 10 of us ended up with minimal to no debt, college debt. Uh, that kind of thing is unheard of today. Now, I'm not sure that my father was always fulfilled and felt gratified by a career in life insurance.
Uh-huh.
To it because he had responsibilities. He took responsibility. He was that guy that change before you have to was probably a quote that would have resonated with him. And it's interesting. I have a younger brother who is a CEO of a brokerage firm.
Yeah.
Uh, and Jim had a pretty good quote not long ago. He said to me, he said, "Tom, I remember a time when resumes were short and careers were long. And now it is exactly the reverse."
Oh God. Oh my goodness. Okay. Mm. Ah, wow. Uh, I think this has been such a very, very nuanced conversation, and that's exactly how um, I would expect, any discussion, because there is no one single um, result or opinion, because we ourselves are very complex. So it's always opinions and thoughts are welcome. So to all the listeners, I think the next time you think your voice is too small to matter, just remember the mosquito. Annoying, yeah, sure, but it's impossible to ignore. Impossible to ignore. And Tom, before we wrap up, if listeners they would like to connect with you, share their thoughts. I'm very sure they'll be having a barrage of thoughts and their perspectives as well. If they would like to connect with you after this conversation, what would be the best way?
I welcome the fact that people email me directly. My email is haggertytp@gmail.com. I also have a book, The Business of Relationships, which is on Amazon. There's contact information in the book. And I'm developing a website that will be under thetomhagerty.com and hopefully give, if not daily, certainly weekly advice on relationships and interpreting those through the lens of business.
Super. So, listeners, there you go. I'll have all the details in the show notes to connect with Tom and check out his resources, and also subscribe to BizBlend. Leave us a review. Tell us what you liked, what you didn't like, and maybe I think making a difference isn't having power. I think it's about persistence. It's about perspective, and it is about being brave enough to be honest when the silence would feel safer for us. So once again, Tom, thank you so much. This was such an insightful take.
Sana, I really appreciate your time and congratulations on a wonderful podcast. I enjoy it and much success to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tom. That means a lot. And until next time, listeners, this is your host, Sana, signing off from BizBlend. Thank you.